Chapter 1181, The Challenge to Battle. One of the 8 masked men paced 2 steps forward and answered. Kitagawa discovered us halfway and shook us off. We've investigated it and it turned out that he has other subordinates in the capital. They were also the ones who intercepted us. And those people? Asked General Fukuda with a grim expression and surging killing intent in his eyes. We killed some of them, whereas the rest committed suicide by poison, answered the masked man respectfully. They should be dead. General Fukuda's expression drastically changed. Training and grooming trusted confidants were easy, but to train people to be ready to die for you was as difficult as ascending to heaven. How did Kitagawa achieve it? He turned out to have trained his death squad without him aware of it? A short while after, General Fukuda and the red-haired man appeared on the camp's outer ring, and the scene of 19 dead bodies there caused their eyes to fill with murderous intent. He's 1184, the only survivor in 5 locations, General. The giant man came to the front of General Fukuda, kneeling on one knee and reporting while his body was drenched wet by his sweat. Shooting a cold look at 1184, General Fukuda coldly spoke to the man. You must know who the enemy is since you're still alive. 1184's lips squirmed a few times, but he shook his head after a while. That mysterious female assassin just appeared out of nowhere, General Fukuda. It was like she just pierced through space and we were suddenly attacked without noticing anything at all. I didn't see any of her accomplices, but I did see some dazzling lights in the woods afar, like a reflection from a sniper rifle's magnification glass. Piercing through space and appearing out of the blue? General Fukuda frowned and said, That's impossible. If my guess is correct, that one must be an extremely powerful expert. Her speed must be extremely fast and made you see illusions all of a sudden. But you must have seen her appearance since you don't know who she is, no? Does she have any peculiar characteristics? 1184 tried to recall and said, I don't know what she looks like since she wore a bronze mask. But I've seen her attire before when we fought the Joyous Palace people. Several women wore that kind of attire, a particular kind of long gown and with their hairs on the temples. Oh, I also noticed a black snake pattern on her neckband. A mistress of the Joyous Palace, huh? Killing intent overflowed in General Fukuda's eyes. Yet, he kept his disbelief inside. The location of this Jing camp was extremely secretive and it was being guarded by 4 armies stationed around it. Only core people knew about it, so he really had no idea how the Joyous Palace people could accurately find it. We cannot delay and wait any longer since they found our home, General. The red-haired man interjected. We all know that the Joyous Palace is like a time bomb and may explode at any time. Hence, we must get rid of this bomb as soon as possible, else we'll lose lots of our people. General Fukuda nodded in response. Then, he said in a deep voice, we got a crazy and insolent adversary here. No longer can we endure and tolerate them anymore. Contact Kitagawa and tell him to hurry back. And summon all the genetic warriors to get ready for battle. Are we going to storm the Joyous Palace, General? Asked the red-haired man quickly. Humph, the Joyous Palace built their base on an isolated island which is protected by some powerful arrays as well, said General Fukuda with a sneer. Our losses will be great if we are to attack it rashly, so we can only fish them out and then give them a beating. The red-haired looked pensive and then replied, in this case, we'd better fight them openly. We'll threaten them if they're afraid to go out. Worst comes to worst, we can just use a nuke and directly blast them to smithereens. General Fukuda happily nodded and said, That's a great idea. If hidden schemes don't work, then open intrigues could be a powerful weapon to use. All right, write a letter of challenge and send it to the Joyous Palace Master. Set the time 3 days later and write, we'll meet at the moon-gazing mountain 3 days later. All right. The red-haired man nodded and immediately turned and left. More than 100 nautical miles from Japan was an isolated island shrouded by fog while the radius of several miles from the island had been installed with a lot of surveillance equipment, which made the inhabitants of the island able to spot any approaching ship immediately. The Joyous Palace was located on this isolated island, and even a special means had been employed before to make the Japanese people see that this island suddenly sunk into the seabed. It was all camouflage to hide their operations. At this time, numerous candles were lit inside the spacious secret chamber of the magnificent palace, built on the top of the only mountain on the island with a faint scent lingering around the room. Dragon Vanquisher Sage was sitting on a futon while silently cultivating. There was a line of big beds placed around the wall in front of him with a naked woman snoring and sleeping soundly on each bed. It was obvious that these women had just been plowed excessively a while ago. Ding! The ring of the doorbell awakened Dragon Vanquisher Sage from his cultivation. Whoosh! With extremely fast speed, the sage instantly left the secret chamber and looked at the man who respectfully stood outside. Then, he asked him indifferently, "You wouldn't have come here should there be no major incident. Tell me what happened." With a bit of fear evident on his face, the man respectfully replied, "We just received a message, Miyagi. Many of our safe houses in the capital have been completely destroyed by General Fukuda's men, and a total of 42 disciples of our Joyous Palace have been killed." Dragon Vanquisher Sage's complexion changed and the killing intent in his eyes thickened. He took a deep breath and then coldly hummed. "Humph, that wretch Fukuda really deserves to die. We've lost nearly 200 people in just a few days. If it goes on like this, they will completely destroy our Joyous Palace in less than a month. It seems that we can't endure it anymore." "Are you going to fight a full-blown war with the Jing camp, Miyagi?" asked the man hurriedly. "This war is inevitable," said Dragon Vanquisher Sage. "All these enemies must die if we want to have a solid foothold in Japan. We must exterminate all the Jing camp as a whole, be it its genetic warriors, ability users, as well as that wretched Fukuda before we truly become the true master of Japan." The man hesitated for a moment and noddingly said, "Since Miyagi has decided so, then this one will summon all the troops immediately. However, we should begin attacking with surprise and sneak attacks and keep nibbling their force. We can fully strike them in an all-out battle after they suffer huge losses. Have you found anything about the nest of that Fukuda bastard?" The man shook his head and forced a smile. "Not yet." "Trash!" Dragon Vanquisher Sage angrily yelled at him. As he was about to turn back to the secret chamber, he suddenly sensed a certain aura approaching. He waved at the man and looked at the female in an aquamarine gown. He furrowed his brows and asked, "You got something, Yuji?" "My men just found some special findings, Miyagi. It should be very helpful in our Joyous Palace's campaign," said Yuji respectfully. Dragon Vanquisher Sage was stunned and hurriedly asked, "What exactly did you find?" Yuji handed the document to him and said, "This document records the hidden sites secretly arranged by General Fukuda in the capital. Even the approximate number of people stationed there has also been marked. I'm willing to lead our members to exterminate these nests of General Fukuda's men if you permit me." A happy smile finally appeared on Dragon Vanquisher Sage's face after he read the information. He traced his big bald head and said, "You've done well, Yuji. It seems my deep love for you was really worth it. I'll take out and lead our people this time. We'll make another plan to completely ruin Fukuda and all his genetic warriors once we've decimated these nests." Having said that, he reached out to grab Yuji and smilingly said, "Take these 2 bottles of Great Luo pills as your reward. I hope you can become stronger and better serve me in the future. Wait until we've completely massacred our enemies and return triumphantly. I'll spend a few days to pamper you then." "Thank you, Miyagi." Yuji acted like she was happily surprised. After receiving the 2 porcelain bottles and fiddling with it appreciatively for half a minute, she then reluctantly stuffed them into her sleeves pocket. These recent days were bound to be tumultuous. The master of Joyous Palace personally led his troops consisted of a large number of mysterious experts. The large forces attacked all the revealed sites belonging to the Jing camp, all of which ended up being washed by their blood. All that was happening drove General Fukuda mad, and he vowed to kill Dragon Vanquisher Sage, the Joyous Palace Master. Time ticked by and, the next morning, a letter of challenge appeared in front of Joyous Palace Master. After he carefully read the letter, he directly replied in a short comment, "I'll be there. Make that old vagabond Fukuda clean his neck and wait for my butcher knife." Somewhere in the capital, Tang Xiu and all eminent monks of the Buddhist sect had returned, and the constant flow of information kept flying in like snowflakes, which was then known to everyone in the waiting. The flow of messages lasted until the evening as the number dwindled. That night, Tang Xiu, Blackface Buddha, and the rest were reviewing and redesigning the operation plan and then waited afterward. They were not anxious as it was still 2 days away from the battle between the Joyous Palace Master and General Fukuda camp. Sect Master Tang, would you like me to send a message to my sect to send more hands? I always feel that the people we have now are not enough. Blackface Buddha spoke after putting down the chopsticks in his hands with a hesitant look on his face. Tang Xiu drank a cup of wine and smilingly replied, "How is it not enough, though? I think what we have is more than enough, honestly. Let's just wait until they both suffer a big blow. We'll shock them when we enter the stage later." Blackface Buddha looked somewhat helpless and nodded. "Well, Sect Master Tang is sure that we have enough manpower. But please don't refuse even if I send the Grand Abbot a message and he agrees to send more people to support us. I won't say anything more if he thinks we can deal with the issue here." "I see. You can send a message to the Grand Abbot about the situation here if you don't feel at ease, Blackface Buddha." Tang Xiu nodded. "But please keep in mind not to do anything that could expose us." Chapter 1182, Preparation Before the Battle. The hazy distant mountains were as though covered with a thin layer of muslin that made it faintly discernible, along with the ethereal clouds that were seemingly neither close nor distant around it. The dark lines in the scenery that separated the blue horizon and the aquamarine sea were as though they had been lightly painted with a paintbrush. A closer look at the mountain showed the sea to its east with pasture on its west side, while the northern and southern sides were guarded by the winding and undulating mountain corridor with precipitous rocks and steep forest. Thanks to the vigorous wintry wintersweet plants and the tenacious tall green bamboos, the mountains still had some spots with lush greeneries even in the cold winter. Whoosh! A cold current lingered in the blowing wind at the mountain summit and, suddenly, a ghostly figure appeared all of a sudden and leaned against the pine tree in the summit. The figure was Tang Xiu. There were faint small beads on the tip of his nose as his intelligent and nimble eyes scanned the surroundings. His mind, however, was wandering and full of the churning contents of spells and arrays. It was the place designated to be the battlefield for a full-blown battle between the Joyous Palace and the Jing camp. He rushed to this place with Tangan after learning its location and then began to lay out a huge array as he arrived. The chief purpose of his coming to Japan was to propel Kawako to be the most powerful person in Japan, and thus, either the Joyous Palace or the Jing camp would affect his plan. It was then he decided to resort to killings so as to remove all the obstacles and pave the way for Kawako. "Four men are climbing fast about 2 kilometers eastward, Grand Master." Tangan emerged out of nowhere and reported in a low voice. "They should be Jing camp's genetic warriors." Moving like a flash of lightning, Tang Xiu threw a pierce of jade into the ground and covered the traces with soil and leaves. Then, he grabbed Tangan's wrist and their figures vanished at the same time. Whoosh! 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 4 figures quickly arrived. Wearing black exercise clothes and a katana on their back, with faces covered by masks, they vigilantly scanned the surroundings unceasingly. After a while and not noticing any abnormality, the 4 people then dashed to the other end. What a cautious and careful bunch. Tang Xiu slightly sneered after he and Tang An reappeared again. Tang An's expression, however, was solemn as she whispered, It's very likely both the Joyous Palace and the Jing camp have been truly stimulated by us, Grand Master. I can tell that their next battle should be quite serious.
Yeah.
Else my painstaking efforts of laying out this huge array would have been for naught should they just sit their asses off, commented Tang Xiu. But, do you really not need us to come with you on the day of the fight, though? Asked Tang An hesitantly. I'm afraid they would cease fighting once both of them suffer huge blows. Ah, you never participated in the battle between cultivators, and you have no idea about the scene where huge crowds of people kill each other at all times. It's extremely bloody, brutal and literally won't end easily. No matter which side shows any fear, they will immediately be in a weak position, and what greets them afterward is a crazy pursuit from their adversary. What do you think is the most important issue in a large-scale war between cultivators? Tang Xiu chuckled. Strength? Tang An hesitated for a moment and probed. Strength is, but only a minor factor. The most important thing is momentum. Tang Xiu shook his head and smilingly explained, individual prowess does have its own role in large-scale wars, yet its significance in the overall picture of the war isn't as big as you might think. To make it clearer, let's make you the comparison. You're now a golden core cultivator, but do you have the confidence to win against tens, hundreds, or even thousands of foundation establishment experts? I'm not confident about that. Tang An shook her head. True powerhouses may be able to escape, but the weaker ones wouldn't have that luxury. Tang Xiu went on with a smile, the momentum of any side will weaken once their powerhouses begin to run. The rest will lose their fighting spirit, leading to a drop in their combat power. Having said that, he took out the prepared shovel from the interspatial ring and dug a 6.5-meter wide and 2 meters deep pit next to the pine tree. After putting 6 fist-sized jades into the pit, he covered the pit with soil and erased all traces as he clapped and said, well, the array is done and this pine will be its core. When both sides finally battle, they will be trapped inside the array once I activate it. Tang An, who really admired Tang Xiu's knowledge and mastery in arrays, nodded and said, are we going back now, Grand Master? Let's go back. Tang Xiu calmly smiled and grabbed her wrist again. The next day finally came. Thousands of genetic warriors from the Jing camp along with hundreds of cultivators occupied a side of the mountain peak, under General Fukuda's leadership. The radius of several kilometers around the entire camp was under tight surveillance by a lot of genetic warriors with hidden and open guard posts literally everywhere around the camp. As dusk came, a large number of Buddhist cultivators from the Joyous Palace also arrived under the leadership of the Joyous Palace Master, Dragon Vanquisher Sage. Descended with him on the other side of the mountain were tens of detection experts, whereas 500 Buddhist cultivators of the palace marched forward to approach the Jing camp's encampment. After an hour, both sides began to engage in minor skirmishes, resulting in some casualties and injuries for both sides. Eventually, Jing camp's genetic warriors retreated toward the mountain. When are we going to start, Miyagi? Yuji, who had been following Dragon Vanquisher Sage, used binoculars to observe the area with those waving banners 2 kilometers away. Murderous intent could be seen flickering in her eyes unceasingly. The sage himself was very happy with Yuji in recent days since he found that she, who he never felt optimistic toward before, turned out to be the most competent person under him now. After gently patting her shoulder, he said, no rush. Victory will be in our grasp if we know ourselves and the enemies. I need to figure out how much strength that Fukuda Vagabond has along with the power possessed by his Jing camp. How do you figure it out, though? Asked Yuji in surprise. Dragon Vanquisher Sage let out a faint smile and pulled 3 black flags from his waist. After chanting a weird mantra, invisible winds gathered from all directions in an image of a bizarre chimera that came out above the 3 flags. The chimera had a tiger's head and a horn, yet with a dog's ears and a dragon body, a lion's tail, and a chiline's hooves. To the many core members and executives of the Joyous Palace, this chimera looked like a dragon, a tiger, a lion, a dog, and a chileen, yet it was neither. In but a few seconds after, however, the phantoms that appeared atop the black flags were covered by the flags as the wind condensed and gradually disappeared into the jungle. The battle today is an all-out one. How much power our Joyous Palace needs to unleash will depend on how much power that damn Fukuda has. Dragon Vanquisher Sage clapped and happily said with a smile. What were those flags you just took out, Miyagi? Yuji's eyes flickered and she asked with a still expression, can you use them to figure out the enemy's power? You have never heard of the Truth Listener? Asked Dragon Vanquisher Sage. No, never heard of it before. Yuji shook her head. A mysterious golden-masked man in a black cloak on the other side of the sage suddenly interjected and explained slowly. In the legend, that term belongs to the spirit beast under the sacred Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva or guardian of the earth, which can recognize everything in the world by listening, especially listening to people's heart. In the mythical fairy tale of Journey to the West, one of the 4 famous masterpieces is devoted to the story of Sun Wukong when distinguishing true and false. But it's just that, a legend in which you must take a grain of salt whether you can take it seriously or not. Dragon Vanquisher Sage happily nodded and looked at Yuji, saying, your contributions this time is remarkable. Avoiding the Joyous Palace to be taken advantage of by the Jing camp's people, which makes you qualified to know some deeper things. These Truth Listener flags were said to be a magical weapon, belonging to a certain eminent monk before. It may not be as magical as the Truth Listener told in the legends, per se, but it indeed has a function to monitor some areas in this world while being invisible. Thus, it can be used to monitor the number of the enemy as well as their strengths. Yuji quickly understood, but a look of worry, nonetheless, flashed across her face. Although she had no idea about the details of Tang Xiu's plan, she was sincerely worried that his plan would be disrupted. If by chance, the Joyous Palace defeated the enemy easily with light casualties, such a situation would make things more difficult for Tang Xiu to destroy the Joyous Palace. Damn it. During the time Yuji was worrying about it, she suddenly heard Dragon Vanquisher Sage curse something with an ashen face. What happened? Asked the mysterious golden-masked man hurriedly. The killing intent in the eyes of Dragon Vanquisher Sage looked as though it was nearly solidified as he clenched his fists tightly, and said in a fierce tone, I didn't expect the Jin camp to boast such a powerful force, neither did I think that he has a group of cultivators with him. I'm not afraid of them, of course. But those bastards are around him, the traitors of the Joyous Palace. Traitors? Who are they? Blurted out the golden-masked man with thick killing intent. That bottom place of 72 chess pieces, Kikitagawa, and the 36th rank, Akahidari. I have no idea how these 2 bastards managed to entice more than 100 of the Joyous Palace's backbone disciples. The mysterious golden-masked man coldly interjected, those 2 will be my first targets once the battle begins, Miyagi. Dragon Vanquisher Sage gritted his teeth and said, I'll give them to you, but do give your best shot to kill them. They must know what fate they will end up in for betraying me. But why should Miyagi be so troubled with them? Just activate the restriction seal you've cast on them and directly kill them since they've decided to betray you. I think their inexplicable tragic deaths will create chaos in the midst of Jin camp and strike their morale. Dragon Vanquisher Sage was silent for half a minute and then shook his head with an ashen face. I have no idea what means they have used. They have broken the restriction seal I cast on them without me being able to detect it. No wonder, huh? No wonder they dare betray me. It turns out that they are now out of my control. How can that be? Yuji blurted out in alarm. The seal Palace Master has cast on your subordinates is not a joke. It cannot be undone at all. Didn't you say that no one else but you can undo that seal in this world? Shut up. Dragon Vanquisher Sage turned furious and shouted fiercely. Chapter 1183, Open War. Yuji deliberately acted fearfully and paced back 2 steps, staying silent and trembling with fear. She already knew that Kitagawa had broken free of Dragon Vanquisher Sage's control. She even knew more about other things than the monk, though she couldn't just blurt it out now. The reason why she spoke like that was intentional, to estrange the monks from the rest of the Joyous Palace experts around him. It must be noted that Dragon Vanquisher Sage had cast the same seal on all the core executives of Joyous Palace, placing their lives under this monk's control. If they knew that there were means to undo that seal and free them from the monk's control, it was very likely for them to have other thoughts in mind. Dragon Vanquisher Sage shot a look at the mysterious golden-masked man and said in a cold voice, "You had better be able to reap the lives of Kitagawa and Hidari after the battle begins. I must squeeze out the method they used to undo my seal from them." "Understood," the masked man replied directly, but a surprised expression flashed in his eyes. 10 minutes later. Dragon Vanquisher Sage's expression looked more sullen, but he was secretly relieved inwardly. He had fully figured out the number and overall strengths of the enemy through the Truth Listener flags. Although the enemy's number was in the thousands with many strong experts, his Joyous Palace still had more experts than them and thus, exterminating the enemy was still achievable. Nonetheless, his side would also suffer huge losses after they had General Fukuda and his force decimated. It would be very difficult to return to their peak without spending a decade or so. The answer is, killing. Besides, two tigers cannot live in the same mountain. Since exterminating General Fukuda and his Jing camp is inevitable for my Joyous Palace to survive in Japan, then it shall be done. The loss may be bigger this time, but I'll become the facto sovereign of Japan later. Even if both the military and government dare not comply, I'll just kill them and replace them. The monk silently thought in his head. At this time, both Dragon Vanquisher Sage and General Fukuda issued orders at the same time and dispatched sneak attack experts to the front line. And thus, the game of life and death in this forested mountain officially started. Yuji was leading tens of her trusted maids as they took a detour to the mountainside. Although the sage ordered her to sneak into the Jin camp, she didn't obey that order and quickly rushed down the mountain under the strange gaze of her maids. "Master, are we going to disobey Palace Master's command by going down the mountain now?" A beautiful woman finally couldn't help but ask. Yuji halted her ace and shot a look at the tens of maids who were neatly lined up before her. Then, she said in a deep voice, "You're my people who I have raised and trained since childhood. Now I'm asking you something. Do you want to pledge your loyalty to me, or to Palace Master?" "We're loyal to you, Master." The tens of maids faintly realized something and answered in unison. "Since you chose to side with me, then we have nothing to do with this battle now." Yuji nodded happily and said, "Also, do remember that we're no longer the Joyous Palace people from now on. We have to withdraw fast right away since we have other missions to accomplish." These maids were shocked, but they believed in Yuji. After exchanging quick glances, they rushed behind Yuji towards the mountain foot. At the Jin camp, Kitagawa was sitting cross-legged in his tent. Large drops of sweat trickled down his forehead, leaving a sheen his face. The veins on his temples wriggled as though they were worms while a white mist lingered above his head. Pwah! He coughed up a mouthful of blood crazily and instantly opened his eyes. With a furious look flashed in his eyes, he quickly grabbed his chest and muttered to himself, "I can easily remove the seal of that Joyous Palace old baldass, yet I'm helpless to crack the seal of that Tang asshole. It seems like I really have to follow all his orders since he has my life under control." Immediately after, he took out a roll of fabrics from his sleeves arm and quickly wiped the blood on his lips. After adjusting his condition and breath for a few minutes, he floated up and appeared outside the tent. He swept over the surrounding with chilling eyes and a frosty look and found that most of his trusted men had disappeared, replaced by some strange and unfamiliar faces standing nearby. From these strangers' eyes who glanced at him once in a while, he realized that they were sent by General Fukuda to monitor him. "Don't blame me for your own heartlessness and unkindness, Fukuda. I've never coveted anything from you. Everything I do is to live on. The thought crossed his mind and he shouted loudly, Jun Yuchu, come here. From a nearby spot, a hunchbacked middle-aged man with a pale face quickly ran to Kitagawa and said with one knee on the ground, what's your instruction for this one, Sir Kitagawa? Where's General Fukuda? I must see him, Kitagawa asked in a deep voice. Those Joyous Palace vagabonds have begun attacking us, so General Fukuda led a troop of experts to rush over. Calculating the time, they should be fighting them at this moment, answered Jun Yuchu quickly. With eyes lit up, Kitagawa inquired. What about the black-robed guards? The humpbacked middle-aged man looked anxious and replied, General Fukuda took all of them. Everyone else except for me has rushed to the battle for the Jin camp's victory. Kitagawa was so resentful inwardly. He knew why General Fukuda only left Jun Yuchu with him. That man definitely believed that Jun was just a weak hunchback, so he might as well leave Jun to him. But those black-robed guards were his trusted men. He took them all so he could order his men to charge through the enemy lines. That man would never care even if they were all dead. Have you been successful in condensing your Buddhist sarira, Jun? The hunchbacked middle-aged man's expression slightly changed. He quickly glanced at the tens of people around and respectfully said, I've completed it 2 years ago. Kitagawa happily nodded. He unsheathed the long katana on his back and instantly bolted to the 2 genetic warriors a little more than 10 meters away. The blade slashed forward and directly beheaded those 2 genetic warriors who didn't react fast enough. No need to hide anymore since you've completed it, Jun. Let's kill them all and leave. Kitagawa fiercely shouted. The hunchbacked middle-aged man quickly flashed to another direction several meters away like light smoke. Several objects that were instantly shot from him instantly pierced and ripped the throats of 3 genetic warriors directly. The slaughter was carried out in an extremely fast manner. The duo killed a total of 46 genetic warriors in just 2 minutes. The hunchbacked man wiped the blood on his machete before he came to Kitagawa's front and respectfully asked, What do we do next, Sir Kitagawa? Kitagawa glanced around and, after making sure there were no living people left in the surroundings, he coldly said, General Fukuda has begun to distrust me, so we no longer need to stay here anymore. He's a heartless man and I'm not that better than him either. He and I are the same breed. Pity I have no means to save those black-robed guards he took with him to their deaths, though. Let's leave. We'll hike down the mountain to carry out other missions somewhere else. Other missions? We still have other missions, asked the hunchbacked man in surprise. A hint of helplessness flitted across Kitagawa's face as he nodded. There is, in fact, another fearsome force in Japan. This force is no way worse than the Joyous Palace and the Jin camp. The battle between these 2 parties now was due to their machinations as well. And now we are taking orders from them to preserve our lives. A horrified look appeared on the hunchbacked man's face. Never in his wildest dreams did he ever expect that a 3rd cultivation force existed in Japan. He had been serving under Kitagawa for decades and knew the man inside out. A fearless man who had never been afraid of anything now had a hint of helplessness when he mentioned that force. He could also sense a bit of fear in his voice, which made him secretly shocked. Up ahead in the mountain top, Tang Xiu calmly stood in silence atop the pine tree while watching members of the Joyous Palace and combatants from the Jin camp appear. He had activated the invisibility charm, completely restrained his aura, and even closed off the pores all over his body. Shortly put, he no longer produced any fluctuation of energy exchange. That was the reason nobody from both sides was able to detect him. Kill. Kill. Then, the sight of thousands of experts going berserk and crazily engaging in fights filled the mountains. The intensity of the battle was so insane that it was out of the average people's imagination. Buzz. 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 Coming from 3 directions, 3 spiritual senses rapidly transmitted to Japan. A few breaths were spent as these three perceptions scanned the whole mountain and watched the battle there. Obviously, some super powerful experts from other countries sent their spiritual senses to watch it. The United States of America. In an unusual separated pavilion in San Francisco, an old man, who was covered in black fog that made his figure faintly discernible, was facing a glittering crystal ball that emitted out soft white light, which he kept injecting the black fog into. Whoosh! A figure flickered and bolted like lightning from afar and appeared in front of the old man in less than a minute. Eyes filled with intense shock, he directly knelt on the floor and quietly waited. That's quite an interesting sight. The black mist-covered old man opened his eyes and spoke with a contemptuous smile. The moment he opened them, it was like a dazzling substance burst out and shot the floor in front of him, creating a 2 m wide and half-meter deep dark pit. The Caucasian man who knelt there suddenly looked up and asked, "What exactly happened, Grand Wizard?" The old man shook his head and smilingly said, "A flock of ants is fighting each other, but two of those ants are quite remarkable. For ants." "A battle? Where is it?" asked the Caucasian man hurriedly. "And who are they? Would you like me to head over there immediately? You told us before to rush to any large-scale battle if possible, since we can benefit from it." Chapter 1184, Who are they? The old man let out a slight contempt while sitting cross-legged and shaking his head. "I only know it's happening in Japan, but I have no idea who they are. Just forget it and don't meddle on this one as it's way too far. Besides, they are just insignificant nobodies and likely won't get far. No matter how hard they secretly go against the sky, they'll never be able to break through the shackles." But, the Caucasian man hesitated and argued. "We may be able to get some profits since that battle in Japan is a large-scale one." The old man gently raised his arm and suddenly, a torrential column of black mist hit the man. He then coldly snorted with a bit of killing intent in his voice. "You dare to disobey me?" "I don't dare." The Caucasian man was sent flying several meters backward and heavily slammed on the wall. He immediately got up and knelt before the old man and left quickly after knocking his head respectfully. While looking at the back of the departed man, the contempt on the old man's expression turned thicker. He indeed had issued the order to head over to any large-scale battle anywhere as they could then act to reap the benefits, without much sweat after both sides mutually suffered heavy blows. However, he had broken through that barrier and now possessed enormous power far from the imagination of any practitioner. Why would he bother about such profits anymore? India, in the pyramid in the midst of a jungle. A barefooted old man with a naked upper body and seemingly in the declining age moved his shaking legs as a strange expression painted his fully wrinkled face. Interesting. I never thought there were so many cultivators in Japan before. Judging from the course of the battle, those Buddhist cultivators should win, no? But, aren't they from China's Buddhist sect? Don't tell me, these Buddhist cultivators have fallen into the demonic path. But the fight of these small fries has nothing to do with me no matter who they are. The most urgent thing for me now is to find that space channel early. I only have 120 years left to live. If I can't find it and am unable to reach the realm where those deities reside, it's likely that I'll vanish in this world." The barefooted old man's body suddenly trembled and burst out a violent aura. His spiritual sense that covered the sky suddenly clashed with the other two spiritual senses. Pwa! The old man spurted out a mouthful of blood crazily, but his trembling body instantly stood straight and shouted, "I'll step on you both sooner or later, two old geezers." China. In a certain part of the Chilean mountain range in Qinghai province, an old lady in a linen coat and a headscarf was lying on a bamboo chair in the thatched cottage, while lines of energy flowing around her were constantly fluctuating. Outside the thatched cottage, 9 long-haired young girls in white dresses seemed to have sensed the energy fluctuation from the thatched cottage and came floating from afar, and neatly stood in a row. The figure of the linen-robed lady suddenly shook and she instantly stood straight. As she opened her arms, her thin fingers that were like the split image of dragon claws were exposed. A hoarse voice then came out of her mouth as she spoke. This ancient one is only responsible for sheltering China and has nothing to do with the battle between those creatures in Japan. You can go there to meddle in if you see things that interest you. But remember, I'll be waiting for you 13 years later in that Arctic glacier. Her words were clearly heard, be it by the black mist-shrouded old man in America or the other one under the pyramid. In that instant, the other two spiritual senses retreated fast like a tidal wave. The linen-robed old lay floated out the thatched cottage and looked up at Japan's direction. A smile sketched on the corner of her mouth as she muttered, "It's just unfortunate that you're all still too young. You all may be talented and your cultivation speed is far above the average humans, yet it will be quite hard for you to break through the crossing tribulation realm in 13 years later, nonetheless. But you've always wanted to roam around, so just do that." The moment after, she retracted back her spiritual sense and shifted her attention to the 9 women standing in front, slowly saying, "Children, I've peeped into your colorful fate and destiny from the heaven ever since you were born. Although I wasn't able to fully understand the former happenings in your past life, I think you'll be brought by fate to him. He has been roaming around and made some achievements, so it's time for you to leave." Grandmother. The 9 girls in white knelt with reluctance evident in their bright black eyes as translucent tears trickled down on their beautiful faces. The old lady calmly continued, "The beginning and the end of karma is sometimes like dreams within dreams that lead to all cases. I'm not clear about your fate and neither can I scry into your sea of mind and that world covered by the darkness. That's why you need to leave now and seek it for yourself now. Off you go, children." The woman in the middle raised her arm to wipe the tears on her face and respectfully asked, "Where should we go to find him, Grandma? I've never been able to divine him nor can I control the course of his fate. He's in Japan now, but if my conjecture is correct, he'll leave that place a few days later, so you all need to find him yourselves." The old lady shook her head. That girl then asked again, "Could you pinpoint us the range, Grandma?" "As always, you're the most high-spirited, Zhongling dear." The old lady couldn't help but chuckle and said, "You've been following this ancient one for decades and knows my temperament clearly. All right, all right. It would be rather hard for you to wander around without a clear destination, so go to Star City. It's the place where he was born and grew up. It's his route, after all." Star City. The 9 girls etched the name and at the same time, kowtowed to the old lady and knocked their heads thrice. "We're leaving, Grandma." The 9 girls spoke in unison with reminiscent eyes and reluctance on their faces. While harboring these feelings, they flew southward to the southern side of Chilean Mountain to the small Chilean county. Back to Japan. At the summit of the mountain, Tang Xiu was still standing atop the pine tree with a tense feeling. He could sense those 3 super-powerful spiritual senses. He could even tell the position of the 3 people who transmitted their perceptions to this place. They were absolutely not in Japan but from some faraway countries. These spiritual senses are neither Ji Chime's or Yan's. He was very familiar with their spiritual senses, so he was sure now that there were also 3 more super-powerful experts on Earth aside from Ji Chime and Gu Yan. It was very likely that their cultivation level was far beyond the spirit formation stage. Who exactly are they? Tang Xiu originally decided to carry out major actions to begin gathering cultivation resources on Earth extensively. It wasn't only to strengthen himself but also for those tens of thousands of people under him. But he instantly changed his decision due to the emergence of these 3 divine senses. Staying low-key and forbearance were a must before he could figure out the owners of those 3 divine senses. He couldn't just easily expose himself for it would be inviting troublesome issues otherwise. His attention then shifted to the battle scene that was getting bloodier and more brutal. He no longer gave it more attention as he was eager to find out from where and who had sent those 3 divine senses were. Therefore, after watching the battle, he floated down and unleashed a strike with his sword. The sword beam slashed down like a lightning bolt and split the pine tree into halves as the felled tree fell next to its trunk. Time passed and the intense battle on this mountain peak between the Joyous Palace and the Jing camp had lasted for 3 hours, resulting in dreadful destruction to the surroundings. The battle of these thousands of people itself kept sending a number of souls to depart this world in nearly each second, and dyeing this part of Mountain Peak red with their blood. Keep slaughtering them. Dragon Vanquisher Sage's eyes had practically turned bloodshot due to the killings. In these 3 hours, he had killed at least 500 genetic warriors and severely injured tens of cultivators, as well as clashed with General Fukuda several times. He did gain the upper hands every time they clashed and was able to injure General Fukuda, yet he had no means to kill him. Suddenly, he noticed that General Fukuda was rushing at him again and crazily brandished his long spear at him. It took only the blink of an eye for the man to dash and appear right before his eyes. "You court your death, Fukuda geezer." Dragon Vanquisher Sage furiously roared and instantly blasted out the monk's staff in his hand. In that instant, it clashed with the long spear for hundreds of times in but a moment. Right as he was able to suppress General Fukuda, his eyes suddenly caught a dazzling ray that kept enlarging and eventually forming a sword tip in 1/100th of a second. Damn it. Dragon Vanquisher Sage's expression enormously changed and instantly avoided the surprise strike of that particular sword. But the moment after, General Fukuda's long spear struck his back and tore open a bleeding wound on it. Right as he blasted out his power, however, the owner of that sword appeared like a shadow in his left rear. Puff. The sword stabbed the monk's left arm, but the middle-aged man in a black suit was also hit by several silver needles flicked by Dragon Vanquisher Sage. The man also lost his eyes and another silver needle pierced through his throat. Dragon Vanquisher Sage suppressed the pain from his wound and slammed his staff to the man's chest the moment he screamed and tried to retreat, causing him to spray out a mouthful of blood. His body was sent flying backward as he heavily fell on the ground and died. Damn you! It was now General Fukuda who flew into a rage. He instantly took out a tube of dark blue gene agent, pulled the cork and drank it. Roar! In just a few seconds, the general's body suddenly enlarged and transformed. His original 1.85 m height now turned to 1.9 m, while his muscles, in particular, looked a bit thinner but, nonetheless, made him look extraordinarily strong and sturdy. Psycho Demon Spear. The long spear in his hand bolted away instantly and created layers of spear shadows which seemingly moved chaotically, yet tightly sealed the surrounding area midair. Chapter 1185, Steamrolling Strike. The killing aura of Dragon Vanquisher Sage was as though materialized. He turned as though a phantom and demonic-like monk who just crawled out of hell. While beating the small drum he took out, he blasted the sound wave energy that rapidly erupted in all directions. The space in the sky wherein the spear shadows were lingering around was distorted as numerous rampaging violent gales struck, greatly reducing General Fukuda's striking power. Kill. The sage spat out a Buddhist golden sarira and shot it at General Fukuda's chest. The sarira cracked and its luster turned dim right as it hit General Fukuda, but the latter coughed up a blood mist and was sent flying backward. However, Dragon Vanquisher Sage himself paid a heavy price at this moment. The overlapping spear shadows may have been rapidly dissipated, but some of them managed to hit him. Along with the scattering blood mist, the monk turned into a fully bloodied figurine. Explode. The snare drum in his head instantly chased General Fukuda and exploded a few meters away from him. The world felt like it was going to collapse due to the fearsome explosion wave while the enormous energy vortex smashed General Fukuda into pieces. Pwa, cough, cough. Dragon Vanquisher Sage himself was sent flying backward more than 100 meters and slammed into the mountain wall. Instantly, several experts on par with Golden Core stage experts quickly appeared around him, one of whom took out a porcelain bottle and took out a miraculous pill and stuffed it into the sage's mouth. Finally, the monk's chaotic aura gradually calmed down. Keep killing them. Be sure to exterminate everyone from the Jing camp. Dragon Vanquisher Sage coughed up 2 mouthfuls of blood again and ordered with dim eyes. Understood. Only a few of the Joyous Palace experts stayed with the monk as the rest were rushed toward the genetic warriors in the surroundings. Slaughter then commenced. Amid the killings, the Joyous Palace members kept shouting, "General Fukuda is dead," and the course of the battle turned into a one-sided massacre. Less than 800 people remaining from the Jing camp desperately fought back and attempted to flee. However, the Joyous Palace experts were much stronger and faster than many of them, causing the Jing camp's genetic warriors to lose their morale, resulting in the faster speed of their own extermination and the deaths of several hundreds of them in just a few minutes. Use thunderstorm. Suddenly, a genetic warrior halted his pace with a decisive look on his face. He instantly tore his coat and grabbed a fist-sized black metal ball from his waist. Thunderstorm. 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 A total of 18 people halted and shouted fiercely as each took the same fist-sized black metal balls, and then stormed over towards the Joyous Palace experts. A series of powerful blasts instantly engulfed everything 100 meters around them. Using their lives to pay for the actions, these 18 people resorted to using the Jing camp's lethal killing weapon, and were successful in bringing down more than 100 people from Joyous Palace to be buried with them. Only those who were at least at the Golden Core stage level were barely able to save their own lives, but with very severe injuries. At the summit, Tang Xiu dashed from under the remaining half of the pine tree, which was previously a dozen meters tall. Even the remaining trunk had also been torn. It's time. He instantly unleashed the divine sword, which bolted away and killed all the Joyous Palace members in the tens of meters radius instantly. While releasing an enormous amount primal chaos energy, he instantly activated the jades he installed around the pine tree as the crux of the array. Along with the injection of his primal chaos energy, the array he had set up and covered more than a 10 kilometers radius was now fully activated. Heavenly Coil, activate. His figure then vanished from many people's eyes, but the rest of them, be them from the Joyous Palace or the Jing camp, could sense the changes in the flow of energy at the moment. Halfway up the mountain, Dragon Mountain Sage's expression enormously changed all of a sudden. He could sense the changes in the energy flow of the world in the surroundings. Despite being seriously injured, he abruptly jumped up and shouted, "All the disciples of Joyous Palace, heed my order. Stop chasing the enemy and immediately move to my position." What? All the members of Joyous Palace in the radius of several kilometers shifted their sight to Dragon Vanquisher Sage's position with an incredulous look. Never once they ever thought that the Palace Master would issue such an order when they were about to completely decimate the Jing camp. Why? The big question mark popped out in their mind. After the fast communication with their comrades in the surroundings, they finally chose to obey the command and passed the order to the rest of them around, and then quickly dashed toward Dragon Vanquisher Sage's position. Many genetic warriors immediately felt relieved upon noticing that their powerful enemies from Joyous Palace were no longer pursuing them. They no longer wanted to stay on the battlefield anymore now that General Fukuda had died. Saving their own lives was the most correct choice at this time for them. Bang, bang, bang. Just as they were about to dash to the foot of the mountain, they suddenly slammed into a layer of energy shield. The energy shield's overlapping layers rippled as they hit it, thoroughly shaking them to the core. It was such a bizarre situation they had never encountered since they never knew the existence of arrays, to begin with. Back to the halfway up the mountain, Yukiji's eyes glanced at the surrounding with a shocked face. Then, she quickly ran toward Dragon Vanquisher Sage and quickly reported. Someone must have arranged a huge array here and were now trapped within it, Miyagi. The sage's face was extremely solemn as he nodded. That's right, someone has arranged this array even before we've arrived here. But I'm sure the person who set this up is absolutely not General Fukuda or anyone else from the Jing camp. That geezer is now dead and nobody among those genetic warriors has this ability. Then who could it be, Miyagi? Yukiji asked hurriedly. Our only enemy is the Jing camp. Dragon Vanquisher Sage tried hard to force himself to calm down. A series of suspicions then crossed his mind and he kept rejecting each suspicion one after another. Suddenly, he turned to glance around and shouted aloud, "Where's Yuji?" Yukiji shook her head and said, "I didn't see her anymore since the battle began, Miyagi." "You?" The sage fiercely said, "I previously gave an order to catch that Yamamoto matriarch, Kawako." "Who took the mission first? Was it Yuji?" "That's right. She took it first." Yukiji nodded. "But then we were engaged in skirmishes with the Jing camp, so we cast this issue aside." Damn. I remember what those people said before they fled. They said the backer behind Kawako Yamamoto is some cultivator from China. Could it be that the one who set up this array here is a Chinese cultivator? Pa. Dragon Vanquisher Sage slapped her hard, causing her to draw back staggeringly for several meters. He then dashed to her instantly and grabbed her clothes, shouting, "Why the hell didn't you report it to me when those Chinese cultivators appeared here?" Yukiji covered her check and hurriedly said, "I thought they were just nobodies, so there was no need to report it to you, Miyagi. Besides, the enemy we were facing then was the Jin camp, so I intended to delay the report to give a lesson to Kawako Yamamoto and the people behind her to you. I thought it was better done after we've rooted out General Fukuda and his Jin camp." "Idiot." Dragon Vanquisher Sage hurled a curse at her. The others had no idea how powerful Chinese cultivators were, but he was well aware of it inside out. If he were to compare which side was more powerful between the Buddhist and Taoist schools, he would, without hesitation, choose the latter as the more powerful one. Why would he say that? It was because there was only one Buddhist sect in China, whereas there was more than one Taoist school. Not to mention the rest from those clans and some loose cultivators. The number was just too many to count. Ba. A large bell-like voice came from afar and 18 figures flickered and moved lightning fast and quickly appeared in front of the Joyous Palace members. Dragon Venerable Sage's pupils shrunk with disbelief. His Joyous Palace disciples were also Buddhist cultivators, but they would never utter that particular word. With the several top executives of Joyous Palace around him, the sage finally appeared in front of the 18 eminent monks of the Buddhist sect, but his lips couldn't help but twitch a few times and some fear even appeared on his face. Blackface Buddha and Jade Buddha? He was familiar with these 18 people in front and remembered each and every one of them clearly. These 18 people were born in the same era as him and they used to be rivals. Never did it occur to him that he would run into all 18 of them in Japan, of all places. Blackface Buddha grabbed his staff and coldly stared daggers at Dragon Vanquisher Sage, saying, "This poor monk was rather shocked and felt strange the moment I heard the Joyous sect re-emerged in Japan. I first thought, who could that powerful figure be that escaped the previous purge? I didn't expect that you're not dead yet, Dragon Vanquisher. You even still indulge yourself in mundane desires and meddle in everything in Japan. No matter what, this monk must kill you to cleanse the Buddhist sect from undesired elements today." Dragon Vanquisher Sage paced half a step backward and indignantly yelled, "You killed 9 martial brothers and 4 uncle masters of mine before and you made me struggle for life for months due to serious injuries you gave me, Blackface Buddha. Is that punishment still not enough for you? The cultivation art you've been practicing was originally tolerable as it was only to follow the steps the unrestrained Joyous Buddha, so you can have a partner for pair cultivation. Yet, your Joyous sect went astray and committed shameful deeds left and right in order to make yourselves stronger. You even went so far to rob and ravish women and fell from grace due to your own evil deeds. Because of you, our Buddhist sect became notorious and has been living in seclusion in the deep mountains with little contact with the outside world, reluctant and not daring to publicize our Buddhism teaching. This sin and disgrace must be washed up clean with the blood of all you. And today, you and everyone from the Joyous Palace must die, for you must pay the deeply grievous price."